Welcome back to Planet Product Owner. You have found the video edition that goes along with the very popular podcast, Planet Product Owner, which you can find on any of your listening platforms that you like. I hope that you have seen some other the videos and you've stumbled upon this. So I'm here to help you out and to develop the art of becoming a product owner, not just a product owner, but for any Agile team member as well. So if you have not checked it out already and you're new to this game, make sure that you're going to check out the three-part series on user stories. That primer session right there should get you up to speed. So now you're ready to go into story splitting and recognizing what that split is so that you can reduce risk, you can get it done, you can show your work and do all of those good, fun stuff about adding value and delivering value with quality that we need from you as a product owner. So let's jump into it. You've probably seen a lot of different references and guidance there. You've got the spider model, you got other kinds of models out there for splitting stories. I think all of those are great. I'm going to share with you five ways that I split stories. And some of this stuff is borrowed, some of it is new, some of it is made up, some of whatever, okay? But that's the beauty of all of this is that we get to create, right? So if you find yourself here struggling with some of these areas, it may indicate that your stories may be too large and they may need to be split. Okay. So the first one here, if you're having trouble completing your work routinely, like pretty much any sprint, any iteration, any time box that you're dealing with, if you're having trouble completing that work within that committed time frame, you may want to consider splitting stories. The other is that maybe you're unable to fully test the story. Now, I didn't say not test the story at all, just maybe not fully testing the story. If that's the case, you might want to consider splitting your user stories. Now, if your feedback covers more than 2 to 3 topics of functionality, when you're demoing that one story, you may want to consider splitting your story. If you go back to the third session and the third installment of the user story primer there, where I talk about the invest model, that might give you some clues here as to what I mean and how we can make sure that we're right sizing or appropriately sizing the user stories for you. But if you're falling into these categories, and I'm not going to say these are the only ones, you may be a candidate for checking out the rest of this video for sure, but looking at splitting your user story so that you and the team are becoming a little bit more effective in that. Okay. The first one that I like to use, the first technique or pattern, is the workflow step. So, as an account holder, I want to dispute a charge so I can stop the bad debit on the account. Well, that's a very large story to me. Think about kind of the things that have to go in line with that, right? So, when you think through the workflow of the steps and you find some common breakpoints there, like the review or the approve or the intake or the notifications of escalations or SLAs, what about notifications of completion or other monitoring and alerts that you might have? Breaks in the process as checkpoints like a stop at the back office and then go manual, right? So some things like that in the workflow may help you there. So when I think about the workflow steps involved in just this one user story, I start seeing a lot of different user stories coming out of this so that because the statuses and the workflow here that we're seeing right here will yield more than one user story. So I can find a split essentially based off of any of these steps in the workflow where it makes sense for us to break it down, stop, get some feedback, check our work, and make sure that we're validating what we're doing. So that's the first pattern that I look for. The second pattern is the operations. Now, as an example, there's a CRUD matrix out there, and I know again you've seen this online. As a user signed up for a service, I need to manage my profile so I can make sure my preferences are set. Well, you think about the term manage here. Manage is the word. That's what we're looking for. So if your user stories are full of the term manage, as far as what it is you're wanting to try to produce there in your code or in your story and presenting that to your user, that's a good candidate to maybe look at the operations pattern here for splitting stories. So we're talking about making changes to an object or to some kind of subject there. So yeah, the CRUD matrix that works great if you have a business analyst background, you're probably very familiar with this: create, read, update, and delete. But other operational functions too. You got sign up, you got edit a setting. Notice that edit a setting, add an additional option, suspend, cancel. Those are some of the words that we want to kind of associate with the term manage when we're looking at larger user stories to split based on this pattern of operations. So you want to look for story splits that are usable, they're observable, they're testable, and they're independent as well. So, for example, user can view a profile picture. User can see the option to manage the profile picture. User can create the profile picture, change it, remove it. You get it. So, those are kinds of the items that we're talking about when we're talking about splitting stories using this pattern of operations. The next pattern here, number three for you, the business rule variations. This one is kind of fun, kind of concerning too, because when we see the documentation that's on the internets and what's online there for you for reference, it could get confusing for you. Let me help clarify that for you a little bit here. As a user, I can choose to purchase any product so I can clutter my garage. We are all guilty of that. Business rule variations usually give us multiple options to which that function would need to adhere, right? So the functions that may come to mind are thresholds, date ranges, selection attributes, retention policies, items like that. So some items that you might find helpful here, rolling off the data after 90 days. There may be some opportunity to split a story there, right? Instead of having that be part of the acceptance criteria, maybe that's a second story and we're able to split that. Is there a need to choose any option, or can we consider just the most popular? So what we're really wanting to do is within this sprint or iteration, can we relax some business rules so we can maybe find what's in the 80%? And I'm a big fan of the 80%, as you know. So that's how we might look at business rule variations according, and again, depending on what it is that we're working on, you may not be able to find this. Now, pattern number four, data variations. Data variations is one that you'll find out here as part of some guidance. So, as a user, I want to view all the parts for the vehicle so I can review the cost of each one. Well, imagine what it's gonna be like on the dev team, particularly if they don't have all of the source data that they need to make this happen and to present this to the user, right? So, sourcing, modeling, using data, the variations there could help you split the stories. The story may not only present an issue if you were to complete the story as it's written here at the top. It's not going to just present an issue with a data load, right? And performance issues, and the team should tell you that. But how could we possibly test all of that data for an entire vehicle when we load it, right? We're not going to be able to validate that, right? So, some options here: sourcing, research, analysis, when we're talking about data variations. We're talking about not just intake, but we're definitely talking about intake. Like, what is it that's needed in order to make that happen from the user, from the input? Data modeling, of course, and storing and retaining the data, and then finally reporting. So maybe the story gets split and it reads something similar to this. As a planner, I want to choose a filter to see a door seat transmission. And even when I say choose a filter, I'm kind of prescribing that to the team, but the team may have said, hey, we understand what you're looking for when you just want to choose door parts to view, right? To confirm them to the manual. So the team may have contributed the word filter here, right? As a product owner, you want to try to stay away from that. You just want to leave it at door seat transmission part and then the value there so I can confirm the list matches the manual, right? So now we're splitting the story down into even further parts, right? As an estimator, I want to view the parts for this vehicle or this part of this vehicle so I can find the price point. So you kind of understand where we're going with data variations and what that means. I hope you find this helpful. When you're working with a large story requiring lots of data, remember, keep a focus on what data is available right now and what's going to be available later. That might actually make up your mind on how you're going to split the story. Okay, so let's move to number five here. Data entry methods. As an applicant, I want to view status updates throughout the process so I can track the progress in real time. Well, what other options do we have to interface with the user on this data entry? I usually don't limit this just to intake. What I mean by that is input from the user or what it takes to get to the next step in the workflow. But there's some options here like controls in manual versus automated, API versus file, look and feel, complicated, simple, and complex, right? So when you consider the difference between adaptive data on the screen and selections versus searching fields and things like that, you may be able to understand how to split it based on data entry. So data entry also could mean upstream back to the user. right? So as an applicant, I want to be notified when the request is in process or when it has been escalated or when it is complete. I don't have to get the whole thing here at one time. It's going to be very difficult. And this might take you even back to the workflow pattern that we might have found earlier on the first slide or at the beginning of this session. So I hope that these patterns help you. These are the 5 that I have found to be most helpful. It's really important for you as a product owner, though, and I want to point this out to you, that you're making sure that you're setting and managing expectations with the stakeholders and customers when you're demoing these stories, because you have split them. You have to help them understand that you're breaking this down into a smaller chunk so you can set and manage those expectations. Don't forget that part. Now, altogether, let's have a look here. So we're mapping out this basic flow here. The user logs into a system, user selects a document hub, user sees the option to upload a file, user chooses to upload the file, user sees the uploaded file. Now, we haven't even gotten to the back end part where this goes back to the back office for processing or adjudication or whatever it is, right? We just have a basic map here that says steps 1 through 5, the user is doing something. And notice how each of these statements begins with the word user. It's important, okay? So I can get me a user story here, and we're going to build on to what we've learned. So as a user, I want to upload files so I can get them to the back office agent. That's not really what we want, guys. The user doesn't care about getting it to the back office agent. The user wants to make sure that we got our file uploaded, right? So let's look at the difference here in the next story. As an authenticated user, notice I'm calling that out because the user has to log into the system first. I want to upload eligible documents so I can start the application process. Now I'm kind of getting somewhere. I'm adding value to the user. I'm qualifying the actor. Now the dev team knows that we're not testing people who are in an authenticated space. I want to upload eligible documents. Now this one's fun because now what I'm doing is I'm setting forward some team language, some domain language. It's all understood what we mean by eligible documents. We can upload PNG, JPEG, and PDF. That's it. That's what makes them eligible, right? And the benefit to the user is they can start the application process. Now, as we progress through that and we say, hey, look, maybe that's still a little bit too big because we've got some conditions here in the data in the back end that we have to satisfy. Okay, so let's split the story then. As an authenticated user, I want to upload a PDF so I can verify my information before proceeding. That's a valid story. I like that because now I'm just testing that one document type, right? And I'm not out here trying to test everything all in one fell swoop with a larger than life story. So I hope that these examples were helpful to you. I've got more of those coming in future videos. If you like these videos and you like the podcast, do me a favor, tell a friend, subscribe, share the love, share the news. And until next time, have a safe and fun lean journey, my friends.